And we're off with a bang.
And we are off with a bang.
Or a ding, as the case may be.
A bell ring.
Yes.
A solemn bell ringing in the belfry on a midnight light. All right.
Wow. What a holiday.
Yeah. I love Christmas.
Yeah, me too. And the solstice.
Yeah.
It's one of those years where Hanukkah also falls on Christmas Day. The last day of Hanukkah falls on Christmas Day as well.
All right.
The convergence is occurring.
I really just love the whole spiritual vibe of this.
That sounded garbled to me. Could you say that again?
I love the whole spiritual vibe of this time of the season.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. I noticed was a little funk kind of creeping in. And then on the 21st, I started to feel this glimmer, this kind of like, and then yesterday it went back, got a little funky again. But then there was something in the morning that was like, and I started to feel alive and happy and this sense of purpose and wonder and gratitude.
That's very cool. It's very cool. I think that's kind of part of the whole spiritual vibe is working through the funk. Well, not that, maybe that's not the right word. Working through that shadow, that dark, depressed, cold, bitter.
Finding the light within.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. And then seeing if you can turn up the dial a little bit.
Share it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And especially with the weather the way it was Thursday night and Friday night, like, oh my goodness, when I think about all the people that are just freezing cold and can't go out, no last minute Christmas shopping, there were thousands of flights canceled. People were like, well, we're either going to spend the time trying to get there by Christmas and sitting in airports and God knows where else, or we're going to just decide to pivot and stay home after we made all those plans. And
that reminds me of Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, which, everyone talks about Christmas movies, and there's the big debate if Die Hard's a Christmas movie or not.
It's not a debate.
It actually is.
Not if you ask me.
So where do you fall?
Yes.
All right. But Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, like the sentiment of that story is so Christmassy, so beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, like someone absolute at their limits and then just finding the joy and the light inside another being.
Well, and how there's this element of having to go through the crucible of their own limits of banging up against their own discomfort and their own judgment and their own resentment and their own stress until something gives way. And then what's left? What's there underneath all that?
Yeah.
And that's the miracle of human being, of heart-centered human being.
I think so.
And
I was meditating on that a couple of days ago of like everything it's in me naturally to heal all the stuff, the anger, the grief, the pity, the lack of money, my own physical health, like the light to heal that, the healing is available. It's there and it's natural.
I agree. It's the context of, when you look at our bodies and if we just give them the basic things it needs, then it's capable of generating life. Like, it's amazing when we think about it.
Yeah.
And we're like a body of people together. Like, we're all cells of this great human experience. And so if we're generative enough and generous with each other, we can feel the light. We can feel the literally light. Like there's photons and things being released that are energetically bright and light.
Have you ever celebrated Boxing Day? Like you ever been with
Well,
people or
one of the
that?
great experiences of Mill Valley was that every year a guy named Austin Malone, one of the great keyboardists, he's played with so many amazing bands, Elvis Costello, Bill Kirchen, Commander Cody, like just tons of amazing musicians. He was, for a long time, he was the um, conductor and musical leader of the Bay Area Music Awards too, which is, but anyway, he's celebrated Boxing Day at the Sweetwater every year and threw a party on the day after Christmas. And one of the things about attending that was there were years when I was living in Mill Valley and I was, basically I was either a dishwasher or working at 7-Eleven. And I didn't always have the wherewithal to go anywhere, like to be with my mom or my grandparents. Maybe I'd get there on Christmas, but coming back on Monday and having a place to go when, I could barely afford a pint. And there was, that good humor and camaraderie. And in those days, it was much more a working class town than it is today. But it's still got that basic idea. Boxing Day at the Sweetwater is the way I remember it. And, I'm not exactly sure what the roots of it are in terms of British culture. But I know it's a lonely day in the royal family today because, of course, the Queen is no longer with us. So it's bittersweet in many families on Christmas right now. When people have passed into the great beyond. And I don't know, what comes up for me as I was thinking about talking to you this morning was the sense of wonder and gratitude at being able to look beyond the circumstances of, my challenges and to live into the recognition of, the light, the bigger picture, and harnessing that attitude towards being one of the cells that generates, happiness for people, starting with myself.
Yeah.
And I think that's why Christmas cookies are so important.
Are
They're
you
a little
making
bit of
some?
happiness. No. But they're a little bit of happiness. You could just pop one in your mouth and you get just a little sugar rush. And,
Yeah.
as far as
Yeah.
sins go, Christmas cookies are pretty low on the list.
Yeah. Christmas treats. My sister is traditionally makes homemade cinnamon rolls and has trays and trays of them that she sends home with people. And I've noticed that my children and I have come to count on that tradition. We expect to be going home tomorrow night with fresh cinnamon rolls for Christmas morning.
Yeah, it's funny how our ideas of gifts turn into expectations. And that's one of the things that I notice about Christmas is there's a lot of stress around it too. People
Yeah.
really get stressed out. Like they're trying to meet their own expectations. They're trying to meet the expectations of the people they're in relationships with. And I remember not fondly my own disappointments as a kid sitting around the Christmas tree, like not getting that thing and realizing how silly that was. And then, there were years when we had a lot of abundance, especially when we went to my grandparents' house. And then there were years where it was like, I knew my mom had no money. I knew my dad had no money. And it was like somehow we managed to get a Christmas tree and get it decorated and there were presents there. And in a kind of a context of feeling deprivation, that expectation becomes even more important that something be there. So that something that it's not just bleakness, right?
Well, yeah, but for me, part of the Christmas vibe is the story of the Grinch and how he took all that away from the whole Whoville, took their feast, every present, every stocking, every decoration gone. and they still turned up in the town square and sang their hearts out joyfully. It was
Yeah.
just, and I think like that's the, um, that was the magic, for lack of a better word, that grew his heart 3 times that day.
Just imagine how much happier they would have been if he hadn't stolen all their shit.
Well, I don't think they would have been happier.
Right? I get that. I get that about you.
You learn to be happy with nothing when you're poor.
Yeah, and poor in material does not mean poor in spirit, and I think that's the kind of the kernel, the diamond underneath
That's
all of
it.
these holidays
Right.
is this idea of bringing forth good cheer, peace on earth, goodwill towards all,
Yeah.
and that starts here. It starts, I'm pointing at my chest for those of you who aren't watching. That's where the fire burns,
Right.
you know.
Exactly. And it does seem it's kindled by sharing it.
Yes, absolutely. Company is the key, right?
Yeah.
Telling stories, like imagine being there were some boho celebrations there where there wasn't a lot of wealth, and it was like a little odd because it wasn't family, and we weren't there on Christmas. I don't think I spent a Christmas at the boho house or whatever, but around that time there would be these, like, let's gather together, we'll get the bottles of wine, we'll gather up some food and some weed, and we'll sit around and we'll laugh and we'll tell stories. And the fact that we don't necessarily these are those of us who do have families to go to, and those of us who don't, it didn't really matter in those moments, because we were our families for each other.
Yeah. I think the lowest Christmas I ever had was with Sid at the East Blythedale house. And we had been invited to people's houses, but we didn't go. And it was just him and I, and we were eating like cold beans out of a can, each with a can and a fork. And we were like, Merry goddamn Christmas. And I just swore like I would never do that again. I would never find myself with invitations and alone on Christmas.
Yeah, there's something about choosing to cultivate that grinchiness, that low vibration, that darkness.
Yeah.
And I sort of, I see that instead. Like, he would tend to eschew and poo-poo things like that, and then he would grin at the same time, right?
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of the people who I hear talk about Sid, they talk of how warm he was. But people who lived with him talked about what an asshole he could be and how dark. And I know one of the challenges was when he was really binging the last few years, he'd get really poisonous and just take it out on people he was living with.
Right, and that's kind of what that old Christmas Carol story is about. It's about Ebenezer Scrooge and how he's fallen into this disdain for humanity, and how, in the darkness of sleep in the winter, he comes to know another aspect of himself, which recognizes, the ghosts of Christmas past and present, and then the future. And I think that fable's really good because it inspires even, it inspires people who have plenty and withhold it. But it also inspires people of what the true richness is.
Yeah, I love when Marley first comes to him and Scrooge says, "But you were always a good man of business." And Marley's all, "Business, mankind was my business." And like, yeah, that's really what it's about.
Say more about that. What is that? How does that work for you?
So
It's
that
really what it,
speaks to how, yes, presents and decorations and food and, but those are all material things. And they should be a byproduct of the business of joyfully interacting with people, helping a person that you see needs help, sharing a smile, and continually looking within for that light and joy de vivre.
I remember being young, a boy, and how the holiday was always about what I was going to get. And slowly over time, in my late teens and early 20s, it became what do I have to give?
Yeah.
And I started to realize how that really makes it for me more than the getting. And don't get me wrong, I'm like still hoping there's some kind of, nice little thing under the tree. But but I've already like experienced a lot of vibrance and excitement and joy, having produced the Christmas song that we played the other day, and then also, being generous with my time, energy, and attention.
Yeah, you were caring for the ill.
Yeah, it's 2022, the year of the COVID Christmas, almost. So yeah, someone got it 2 weeks beforehand, just long enough to get well, just in time for Christmas
That's
Eve. So
yeah.
yeah,
Let's
yeah.
hope that
So
hospitals are far away from us this Christmas.
yeah, I was thinking about that too, because of course last year on Christmas, my brain shut down for 8 hours. I completely
Yeah.
lost my memory.
Yeah. Has any of that come back at all?
Well, I don't remember the day at all. They say I
Right,
never
so
will.
nothing came back from that.
No.
Wow,
What's
that's
come of it is a remembrance of that being a reset, an opportunity to see life through a different lens, and then also of letting go of my stresses, and then kind of a recognition of how fleeting things could be. Like, how many more Christmases do I get?
yeah,
Right? I don't know. Who knows? Right? And
yeah,
um, it's it's amazing to be given the gift of a scare like that and to come through it whole. Right? I just lost a few hours, and I to bear witness to the way my partner Kathy immediately stepped in to be there for me, and that's tremendous. Um you know what it is? I'm going to just toot my own horn for a second. When I was sitting there and I didn't know what happened 3 minutes ago for the fourth hour in a row, I was still like a funny guy saying hello to the nurses. Like, and she told me, she said, like, the nurse would come by and you'd just be like, so good that you're working Christmas. Thank you so much. Right. And then I'd say, do you want to hear a Christmas song? And I'd sing the Mele Kaliki Maka song to them. The line I knew, the one or two lines I know. I don't know the whole thing. And just to realize that at a root level, when the whole thing shuts down, I'm just basically a happy-go-lucky guy who wants people to be happy and be appreciated. And do you know what people talk about when they talk about timelines? It's this idea that there's all these different parallel realities, and that
okay, yes,
depending
yeah,
on what happens, we jump timelines, right? As either
right,
collectively or individually. And I have this idea of like, that was like a whole shift in my timelines. Like I'm living now and consciously aware of this whole other self, this whole other possibility. And here we are. It's another opportunity to look forward into 2023,
yeah.
and with an eye towards what can we give? What can we do?
I like that. What can we give? What can we do? Yeah.
And recognition that the healing you were talking about a few minutes ago can happen like this. It doesn't have to be like a big struggle or a big process where you go through the whole list of reasons why the healing's challenged. It can
Right.
just actually just shift, you know. And a bunch of it did for me that day, right? Like we were talking yesterday, Kathy and I were talking about it. We are like, you were so stressed,
Hmm.
Mark. There was all the stuff you were worried about, relationship stuff and worldly affairs, and then it was all lifted. It was all lifted away from me. And I've actively chosen not to attach myself to all the things I could worry about. It still comes up.
Right.
Like I
Yeah,
still experience, and I just go, okay,
yeah.
what else can I focus on? What can I focus on that's generative? And that comes from my sense that the universe is affected by my thoughts. And so I cultivate the thoughts of healing, as you said,